Thanks for the presentation and for the invitation to be here with you today. Well, I don't fund research, so don't expect any money from me, okay? It was very interesting to hear that if what civil servants in Brussels do is briefings and minutes, I mean, maybe they will be out of work very soon. So I don't know whether that applies to all funding agencies, but anyway, I don't think so, and we will debate about the use of generative AI at the panel later. So when I was invited to talk about this, I had like a blast from the past because I was working on this topic like 20 years ago, and we had a project about different ways of publishing research, because the final objective of science is that you generate good ideas, generate good results, you publish them so that science can be built on top of science. So the way we communicate science is essential, and we need to avoid any bad use of the publication means by people. And the questions that we faced like 15 to 20 years ago is, can we build a different way of publishing research that is not the classical one? This concept of a paper that actually has like a couple of centuries, but was not the case before. Can we publish differently? And if we publish differently, how can we assess the quality of what is published? So those were the questions that we had in that project. And out of that, there were different outcomes. One of them was a tiny component to assess reviewers and assess papers that made its way into this little thing called open peer review. And that is being used in the digital CSIC repository, in particular in one journal. Well, this is the paper that explains that model. That was in 2016. Sorry, I'm not intending you to read it, of course, but it's just to give you evidence that there was a publication on that. And that is being used in this digital CSIC. And there are a number of elements there that are very, I would say, they were very innovative at that moment, and probably still are innovative, is that we associate paper reputations, and this is something that is public in the repository, but we also have a review reputation that is derived from the reviewer's reputation, and we will talk about that. So all this is made public, but the reviews are open as well. So the idea here is that when I write a review about a paper, that review becomes another object that can be evaluated itself, okay? And these ideas percolated here and come from this project. It was a FED project. It's a pity that we have people from ERC. It's a real pity that FED is not being funded anymore. We have been pushed into the European Innovation Council, which is okay, but I think FED played a very important role in collaborative research in which new ideas were kind of discussed. And this is the case of this project, in which we talked about liquid publications. I will first explain you the ideas behind that to see if that spark interest on you, and then I will go to something more practical after that. So, what's the motivation? I will not be talking about projects, funding projects. I will talk about papers, okay? To a large extent, a project proposal, a paper, have many similarities. And the techniques you apply to reviewing papers can be applied to reviewing or evaluating project proposals, okay? So what's the problem? I mean, too much time reviewing papers. I mean, we academics spend a huge amount of time reviewing one another's work, okay? And this has been exploding in recent years. I mean, I was listening to 600 project proposals. I mean, in the last NeoRIPS, there were 12,000 papers to be reviewed. And that had to be done in less than a month or around a month. I mean, how do you do that? 3 reviews per paper, 36,000 reviews in a month? Where do you get the reviewers from? Okay, there are other issues, like legal issues reusing your own materials. Okay, I wrote a nice introduction to the topic in a paper, wonderful. Now, I want to report a new use case using the same model. I cannot reuse that because the plagiarism tool will say, hey, this was written in a previous paper. Yes, it was my paper. I'm kind of reporting a new use case. Why can't I use that is exactly the same that I need now. I need to rewrite it. That is silly. Limitations on the publishable content. I mean, we go to conference, you have 6 pages, or you can publish in 2 pages. I mean, we live in the digital world. I mean, what does it mean? Of course, there are limitations. If I'm a reviewer, I don't want to have papers that are 20 pages long. But in terms of publishing content, why is those strict limitations that come from the time in which we were printing them, and we didn't want to go home with 20 kilograms of paper, okay? Evaluation pressure. I mean, there are very, very bad practices by some researchers in which they publish a large amount of papers that are of very low quality, because if they don't publish, they don't get promoted. So there are all these sociological elements that influence here. The review material is lost. And this is a pity. If you go to the publications in the 19th century, people like Darwin publishing in the Royal Society, you would see that the comments on papers were published as well. So the reviews were valuable materials. Now, in most of our communities, we are losing that material. It's lost. And that's very important. Why not seeing a very nice review to your work and then see, oh my God, this guy knows very much about this topic, contacting the reviewer and say, why don't we write together a paper in which we solve the problems that you detected in my work, so we can collaborate and continue work. I think this idea that reviews should be anonymous and hidden, I think this is something that should be changed. And there are very simplistic models of decision making. At least in computer science and artificial intelligence, in the end, people give a number and there is a self-confidence, and then what you do is a weighted average of the confidence multiplying the number. And that gives you a ranking, and that's it. The cutting line, and then you pass or you don't pass. So all these things happened already 20 years ago and long before, but are even more pressing now, I think. What did we propose? Something very crazy, and you may say at the end, today I listened to a crazy guy talking about how to organize publications. But we had the idea that we would have 3 types of nodes. We would have what we would call SKOs, scientific knowledge object. We would have researchers, and we would have fields of research. So with different relationships between them. Of course, between a a researcher and an SKO, we could have different relationships. Like I'm an author of that SKO, or I'm a reviewer of that SKO, okay? And similarly with the others. You can have, for instance, structural graphs in which we have a conference that is composed of papers, and papers that are composed of sections. Why is it interesting having that distinction? Because sometimes, and probably you can find examples, you review a paper and you say, oh my God, the background knowledge is fantastic, it's very well done, but the model is wrong. But the state of the art is really nice. Why shouldn't we consider the different elements in a paper on their own, so that you can say, this is very good, this is not so good? We have to refer to the paper. In the narrative we can refer, but in the end, we are evaluating the paper as a whole. Having part of could be an interesting way of a fine-grained analysis of the research output. We can have versioning. We said rewriting. Okay, no, I cannot use the same introduction. Okay, let me just take the same introduction, there are 2 new works that appeared last year. I rewrite it a bit. I have a new version of the introduction, and I declare it. There was this introduction. I have now a new introduction with some add-ons. It's a revision of the introduction. I don't need to spend a couple of days rewriting my introduction. I simply add what I have to add, and I declare it. Why not doing that? Allowing people to reuse. I mean, the idea would be you start developing, you start communicating the results of your research. You do your introduction, your background knowledge, you do your model, you do your refinations of those models, and at some point you say, well, with these different components, I build up a paper. In that context, we call that like freezing a paper. At some point in time, all these things that are dynamics, you say, well, now this is a paper, and I declare that as an element that people could read. Why not allowing that certain parts could be used in more than one paper? Again, we have this part that is being used in this paper, in that paper, just point to it. If we increase the granularity, we are talking about digital object. We are in a world in which we have DOIs for everything. Why not having these digital objects as independent entities? Okay, also the idea of text as a paper, as something that starts with a letter and finishes with a letter at the end. I mean, a very long string of papers, of characters, is also something that we could revisit. These scientific knowledge objects can be a paper, but can be a data set, can be an image, can be a video. So there are many elements that could support your communication of research to the rest of the community. Why just restricting ourselves to papers? Why not having a much broader view on how do we publish our research? All this gives you these kind of complex graphs in which you have the SKOs that could be, as I said, a video or a section of a paper, and you have researchers that review papers, that are co-authors of the papers, and that give basically a complex digital structure of what is the research output. That was the proposal in that project. And on top of that, we developed a evaluation mechanisms, which is what I want to talk about today. But what we wanted is these kind of objectives. First, encouraging early sharing of good ideas only. So if we have bad ideas, don't put them there, okay? So don't try to get a bad paper being published. Only report good ideas. The sharing of noise should be discouraged. We have a lot of noise in scientific publications. Encourage collaboration that contributes to quality and discourage it otherwise. I mean, we want to work with other authors that will add quality to what we write, authors that really contribute to the research. I don't want 100 authors that do nothing as co-authors of the paper. That adds noise to the system. So you should penalize the incorporation of co-authors that are not really bringing anything into the scientific content. Work on the quality as opposed to quantity. Make that quantity doesn't increase whatever you have to increase. Just quality should be what increases whatever has to be increased. We will talk about that. Encourage reuse. We should not rewrite our introductions. Sorry. I mean, we should encourage reuse. And discouraging self-plagiarism or the repackaging of ideas. I mean, I should declare it. Should declare the reuse of something that I already worked. And if I am saying, my goodness, you created a great background knowledge on this topic, I could just point to that. If the authorship is clear of that particular piece of the scientific communication, good credit for you that developed that fantastic content. So the reputation should go to you, not to me, but I could point to it. So this would make scientific communication, again, much more interesting. Making sure that the salami papers do not make you better. The typical work in which, oh my God, I have 5 ideas. Instead of putting them together in one paper, no, I will make 5 papers because that will give me more and more credit and more. No, I mean, make that, adding them together or in separate form will end up in the same situation. So discouraging that element, okay. Well, encouraging new versions, as I mentioned. I mean, the idea that you revise previous work and discourage the otherwise. Decrease the review overload by encouraging risk-neutral submission strategies. What do I mean by that? Sometimes we submit papers that are not well cooked. Say, well, never mind. If they reject them, I will work a bit more on that and I will submit somewhere else. That increases the work that everybody has to do by a huge amount. Let's just stop that practice. How? By making those submissions permanent, persistent. Your submission and the reviews of that submission will be there forever. So if you submit papers taking risks, okay, take risks. But I mean, you may pay for that. So if we would do something like that, people would think twice before submitting scientific content that is not ready for publication, okay? Encouraging writing reviews. When I was listening to you guys about the reviewers, why don't you give awards to reviewers? I mean, you should give awards saying the best reviewers for Fundación La Caixa this year, having these two guys. We gave them 10,000 euros to go to conferences, and why don't do that? I mean, reviewing is a fantastic job, and the same in the commission. I mean, yeah, the commission pays the reviewers, but they never acknowledge the good reviews in a public way. I mean, why not? We have to encourage people to write good reviews. Some conferences are already doing that. I mean, they give some, I don't know, ribbons, or they put them on the web. The best reviewers of this conference are these ones. Okay, so there is some social knowledge of the effort that they are doing. Okay, and of course, encouraging good quality reviews. And I hope I will show how that can be done. So these were the goals, and then we developed, because we came from early 2000s on algorithms for trust and reputation. So how to say whether something is good or bad, taking into account the opinions of people. And we use different models there. There were some algorithms not made by us that were very important at that moment, like eigentrust, that would combine opinions. So it's an indirect trust. If I trust you this much, you trust him that much. I don't know him, but I can use some transitive trust on that. And there were algorithms that would multiply these trust relationships into a converging stable point. Anyway, so inspired by that, I mean, we developed the idea of, it was published in 2010, that when we have a hierarchy like this one, you see ICAI. ICAI is the European Conference on AI. That has different editions, okay? It has ICAI 10 and ICAI 12 in this example. I'm telling you the paper is from 2010, okay? And the example as well. So we have UMass, is another conference, UMass 10. We have the UMass series, and then we have papers, and then sections there. When you see there the little squares, these are the opinions that people gave over that element. So we can have an opinion on a paper, we could have an opinion on a section, we could have an opinion on a conference. Now, what happens? Why do we publish in ICAI? Because ICAI is a prestigious conference, okay? So I'm assuming that if I publish there, my paper will be prestigious. So there is always this idea that I inherit from the prestige of a conference something to my paper, and the other way around. So if I have a paper that is very good, that goes up and gives prestige to a conference. So where the prestige of a conference comes? From the good papers that it publishes, okay? So it's the same. ERC is prestigious. Why? Because the projects there are very prestigious, are very good. And that gives this prestige to the organization. Okay, so the idea here, and I will, sorry, this was thought for more. So we developed a model in which we had these opinions being combined and would go up and down in this hierarchy. And that was basically, I will not go much into details, but for every opinion, we have a time in which this opinion is given. And an opinion in this context was a probability distribution over an evaluation space. So it could be between 0 and 10. So it's like saying, well, this is a 9 paper, or is it between 8 and 9? So you have a probability distribution a long time. So here in this, the impact of a node was basically whether we had direct opinions on it, then the impact would be 1. It means we need to take into account this paper, this section, because we have a direct opinion of someone. If no one gave an opinion before a particular moment in time, neither to the paper, neither to the children of the paper, or the children of the conference, then it will have an impact of 0, and otherwise it would have an average impact of the children. That is in order to see how much a paper influences up. So if a paper has no opinions on anything, it will not influence up. If it has many opinions, it will influence up. Similarly, when they go down, because you have the probability, the P here is what goes up, which is a weighted average of the reputation of the papers, and what comes down with is a weighted average of the fathers of the particular node. I will not go much into details here. I mean, there are papers that you can look into that, but that model allowed for a probabilistic understanding of how reputation of papers would go. It had a problem, and I stop here the presentation of this. If someone is interested, there are papers about that. The problem of that is that it's dependent on adopting the new publication model. So if you do not adopt this publication model, then these algorithms that would go into the reputation of the different pieces and pieces would not work. And that needed to be done by authors and by agencies. So if there are no agencies that accept this new way of evaluating or assess the research of people, then authors will never go there. So this is a situation, a blocking situation we found that was very difficult for us to continue or to try and have impact with that particular model. What we did was to simplify. Okay, we said this is very difficult. Let's try and find a model that can be like a reputation tool that is a bit simpler. And I will show you, this was published in 2016, and that was the model that has been used in digital CSIC in that particular journal. Okay, and I will try and go there quickly. I don't know who is controlling my time. You are. I'm okay? Yeah. So the current publication model, as everybody probably knows here, is that you have a paper, and then you have a number of reviewers that give their opinions on that paper, and then there is somehow a combination. I think in all the ERC and Fundación, Caixa, this is the method that this is being done. Okay, so what do we propose in this model is to add judgments on the reviews. So the thing is, we will not just give an opinion about the paper, but we are going to give an opinion about the review. Sometimes people are trying to use automatic methods. For instance, I remember program chairs getting mad about the number of papers, the bad quality of reviews. What can we do? People like saying, well, the number of words in a review, if it is below a certain amount, the typical short review in which you have one line, remove that review. Do not consider that. These were kind of automatic methods, but the automatic methods could be wrong. We have a lot of discussion about generative AI, by the way. They can be wrong. So maybe a sentence was, this is wrong because there was this paper that showed that this model is wrong. Yeah. Maybe you don't need to say more than that, and that is a perfect review that should be taken into account. You cannot discard that. So you need the semantics of what is said in order to analyze. So that's why what we understand is that AI should be used to help human beings, not to substitute reviewers, but to help reviewers. And the AI should combine the opinions of reviewers for papers, but also for reviews. And that is what the model tried to do. So here the idea would be that you write a number of reviews, but then the final value will be weighted by the reputation of the reviewers, not by the self-confidence that the reviewer is assigned to themselves, but by the reputation that is computed from the peer reviewers. It's like in the evaluations in Brussels. We never evaluate what the other evaluators say about the project. We may discuss, that's fine. But if we could say in a private way, this review is crap because this and that, I mean, that could be interesting. And I will tell you an example later. It could be interesting to be considered. So this is a very simple equation that basically, given the opinions that reviewers have over a paper, we can just make a weighted average taking into account the reputation of the reviewer. If a reviewer has a very bad reputation, his or her opinion will not be taken into account. So that's the basic idea. Also, the aggregation of papers' reputation will be weighted by the number of authors, because this is something, if there are 100 authors, what part of the reputation of the paper goes to me? I mean, we cannot give a premium to all of them. So you can discuss in which way you can decrease or map the reputation, but it's clear that if there is a paper, an excellent paper written by one person or an excellent paper written by 100 people, it's not the same in terms of the reputation for each one of them. So this is controversial, I know, but this is what we propose there. And this is the equation that would do that, where this gamma is 1 divided by the number of authors with an exponent that is telling you how that is going to be propagated. But the final idea is that there will be a reputation as an author for a reviewer, okay? But you will have also a reputation as a reviewer. That is not necessarily the same thing. You may be an excellent author and a crap reviewer, okay? And we all know that. And so the idea here would be that the reviewer's reputation will be the aggregation of the opinion of others about the reviews that they have done, weighted by the reviewer reputation of the others. So if someone with a very bad review reputation says that my reviews are crap, that will not be taken into account, okay? So that's why we need algorithms that determine the fixed point in which these reputations are computed. Okay, is a minor detail here where AI could be also used, is that I may give a direct opinion on your paper, okay? Nuria's paper, I say, is very good, okay? Or I may not give sorry, no, wrong. No, we are reviewing the same paper. Okay? And then I say, your review is very bad, or is very good, okay? But if I don't say anything about that, we could compute something like the similarity between our reviews. If there is a big similarity between our reviews, indirectly, I'm saying that her review is good, because I consider myself good, of course. Yeah. So these two elements are taken into account in the measure of this model. I will not go into, but basically the reviewer's reputation will be collecting the opinions of others about my reviews, weighted by their reviewer reputation. Okay. Okay, reputation of a review would be naturally computed, as you can imagine, by, as I said, by taking the reviews, the opinions on that review, weighted by the reputation of the reviewer. That's the model. Basically, in this graphic, you can see everything. So when you write a new review, okay, you write the review, then you can generate opinions. That could be an opinion of a reviewer, and then that opinion of a reviewer will influence the reputation of the reviewer, and will also influence the reputation of the review, of course. And when you write a new review, that influences the reputation of a paper that then determines the reputation of an author. So these models, the properties of these models, I will just, well, to converge, we need the algorithms to run. There are some, I will not go into details here, but I mean, we did some simulation results at the beginning showing that basically, depending on the quality of the reviewers, so the model was correct in the sense that if we introduce artificial data into the system, the equations really model what they should model. But of course, we need the evaluation of these, and we evaluated it in a conference. I will, at ICHCAI. I happen to be the program chair of ICHCAI in 2017, okay? ICHCAI is the International Joint Conference on Artificial Intelligence. It's one of the largest conferences in the world. And I took an implementation of this module, ARM, and I convinced, I don't know if you know a tool called ConfMaster. It's a tool for handling papers in conferences, okay? So I convinced Thomas Preusch, who is the programmer of the thing, to put that component into the system and to allow reviewers to rate other reviews, okay? So I applied the model in full there, and I generated two rankings. One was the ranking using the self-confidence, the other the ranking using the reviewer reputation. It was very interesting. There was a 5% of papers that were at the frontier that fluctuated depending on which model of which kind of position you would take. I saved many papers because they were good according to the reputation of reviews, and we're looking into, and you could understand that by then looking into the reviews. So for the analysis of the frontier, that was extremely good in order to save papers. These kind of false negatives, so papers that were considered to be bad could be saved because of the model. So I think it has some value. This particular model, ARM, is not too, how to say, changing the way we do things, is building on the current practice, just adding this element of reviewing the reviewers, and it's not as complicated as the original liquid pub that implied all this change in the publication model. So I think we should go, this is an example of the directions we could use. but basically using AI as a tool that supports, as had been said already, the work of the reviewers in the process. And to finish, yeah, basically what I recovered from the past, it was very funny because I was reading my papers that were 15, 20 years old on how these worked. And well, the idea here was to introduce judgments into the process, and having a more precise reviewer reputation implies a more precise paper reputation and then a more precise author reputation. So the idea here would be that we can use, of course, we don't publish in digital CSIC the reputation of authors. We are not that wild, but we publish the reputation of papers and the reputation of reviews. And I think that's an interesting move forward. I think we have to move more into open peer reviews, and I think that could be something that could be interesting for the funding agencies as well, so that the reviews, why not making them public, and that the reviewers stand by what they say of a project or of a paper. I think these are practices we should start incorporating. Thank you very much.